My wife lied about birth control, got pregnant by her supervisor, and I exposed her cheating with divorce papers at her baby shower. Hey everyone, I've been holding this in for a while, and I feel like I need to let it out. For context, I'm 33, and my wife, well, now my ex-wife, Jessica, is 31. We've been together since college and married right after graduation. Back then, everything felt perfect. We were both ambitious, had similar goals, and just clicked in a way that made me think, yeah, this is my person. The plan was always clear from the start. We'd build our careers, save up, maybe travel a bit, and then, when the time was right, start a family. Kids weren't off the table, they were just something we wanted to wait for until it made sense financially and emotionally. We both grew up in households where money was tight, and we didn't want that stress for ourselves or any future kids. Jessica had always been big on stability, and I'm pretty practical too, so we were on the same page for a long time. We talked about how expensive it is to raise kids, daycare, school, college, all that. Plus, Jessica wanted to feel established in her career before taking time off or juggling work and parenting. I totally got that. I work in IT, which is solid but demanding, and I wanted to be sure we were ready before diving into the whole parenthood thing. Over the years, it felt like we were working toward those goals. We moved into a nice little starter home in a decent neighborhood and even adopted Max, our dog, who's basically our fur child. Life was good. Jessica worked in marketing, and she was always talking about how she wanted to climb the ladder. She's a hard worker, no question about that, and when she got a big promotion about a year ago, I was genuinely proud of her. The promotion came with a higher salary, more responsibilities, and longer hours. It wasn't ideal since it meant she was home less, but I figured it was a trade-off for her career growth. I knew how much it meant to her, so I tried to be supportive. If she had to stay late or go to some networking event, I'd cover things at home, cooking, cleaning, taking care of Max. We didn't have kids, so I thought it was manageable. At the same time, I started noticing that Jessica seemed more stressed than usual. She's always been a bit of a perfectionist, but after the promotion, she became even more tightly wound. She'd come home exhausted, barely talk about her day, and just zone out on her phone or the TV. I chalked it up to her adjusting to the new role. It wasn't easy for her, and I didn't want to add to her stress by asking too many questions. Around that time, we started having fewer conversations about the future. Before, we'd casually talk about our 5 or 10-year plans. What kind of house we wanted to upgrade to, where we'd like to travel, or when we'd start thinking about kids. But those talks kind of faded. If I brought it up, she'd shrug or say, let's focus on the present for now. I didn't push it. I figured she was just overwhelmed with work. Now that I'm writing this, I realize there were probably small things I should have picked up on, but at the time they didn't seem like a big deal. Jessica was busier, sure, but I assumed it was temporary. I kept telling myself, this is just a phase. Once she settles into her role, things will go back to normal. A few months ago we were having breakfast and out of nowhere she just casually drops, I'm pregnant. I froze mid-bite. My brain completely short-circuited because this wasn't part of the plan. We'd always been super careful about timing, and as far as I knew she was still on birth control. So, I asked, wait, what? I thought you were on the pill. She didn't even flinch, barely looked up from her plate and said, I guess it failed. That's it? Like she was talking about the weather or something. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there trying to wrap my head around it. I wanted to feel happy, really I did, but none of it made sense. We'd agreed on waiting, so why now? I asked her how far along she was, and she said she'd only just found out. She hadn't been to a doctor yet or told anyone else. She kept saying things like, this is a good thing, right? But her voice didn't exactly sound convincing. The whole thing nagged at me all day. Something about how casually she dropped the news and shrugged off the pill failing didn't sit right. So, I called a doctor, not our regular one, just a local clinic, under the guise of wanting more information about birth control effectiveness. I asked how common it was for the pill to just fail. The nurse on the line was polite but matter-of-fact. If taken correctly, the failure rate is less than 1%. Were there any missed doses, medications that could interfere, or inconsistent use? I could practically hear the skepticism in her voice. That answer only made my head spin more. Jessica wasn't careless, or at least I thought she wasn't. She always made a point of being responsible about this stuff. So either she wasn't telling me everything, or I was missing something big. I tried to play it cool, but inside my mind was racing. I didn't want to come across as unsupportive, but I had so many questions. How did this happen? Were we really ready for this? Did she actually want this, or was she just saying that because it was already happening? I figured we'd sit down soon and have a real conversation about what this meant for us, but before we even got to that point, things started to shift in a way I couldn't ignore. It was subtle at first. Jessica wasn't really talking about the pregnancy unless I brought it up. Even then, her answers felt rehearsed. I figured maybe she was still processing it all, which made sense. I mean, this was big news for both of us. I tried to be patient, thinking she'd open up when she was ready. But then came the expenses. We'd always been good about managing our money. Neither of us came from wealthy families, so we'd learned early on to budget carefully. Our joint savings account was something we both took pride in. It was enough to give us some breathing room if anything unexpected happened. Over the years we'd built it up slowly, just in case. That's why I was so confused when I logged into the account one day to check on a deposit and saw several large withdrawals. There were charges for things like spa days, luxury skincare products, and what looked like high-end boutique shopping sprees. One transaction, in particular, stood out, a $900 charge at some fancy baby store. I knew we hadn't even started discussing baby stuff yet, so what was this all about? When Jessica got home that evening, I brought it up casually, trying to sound neutral. Hey, I noticed some big withdrawals from the savings account. Did you buy something for the baby already? She didn't even look surprised, she just waved it off like it was no big deal. Oh yeah, she said. I've been picking up a few things here and there, just to prepare. $900 for what exactly? I asked. She shrugged. A crib, some clothes, a few essentials. It didn't sit right with me. We hadn't even talked about what we'd need for the baby, let alone agreed on a budget. And a $900 crib? That didn't sound like something we'd normally spend money on, especially when we didn't have a clear plan yet. I didn't want to escalate things, so I let it slide for the moment. But over the next week, the spending didn't stop. In fact, it got worse. Every time I checked the account, there were more charges. Designer handbags, fancy lunches, gifts for her friends. None of it seemed related to the baby at all. By the end of the week I couldn't ignore it anymore. Jessica, I said one night while we were watching TV, can we talk about the savings account? She sighed, already annoyed. What about it? Well, I've noticed a lot of spending lately, and I'm just trying to understand what's going on. Some of these charges don't seem like they're for the baby. Jessica rolled her eyes and paused the show. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? I'm pregnant. I deserve to treat myself a little. Treating yourself is one thing, I said, trying to stay calm. But this account was supposed to be for emergencies or for the baby, not spa days and handbags. It's my money too, she snapped. Why are you acting like I need permission to spend it? I didn't know how to respond to that. She wasn't technically wrong, it was her money too. But I'd been scrimping and saving for years, skipping nights out with friends, driving my old car for longer than I should have, working late hours to make sure we had a cushion. And now she was blowing through it like it was monopoly money, not the result of years of sacrifices. It wasn't just the spending, it was the fact that she didn't seem to care what it had cost me to get us here. I'm not saying you need permission, I said carefully. I'm just saying we should probably talk about big expenses before making them, especially now with the baby coming. Jessica groaned and crossed her arms. You're being controlling. I can't believe you're stressing me out like this when I'm literally carrying our child. That shut me up for the moment. I didn't want to be the bad guy, and I definitely didn't want to come across as unsupportive. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Jessica had never been like this before, so dismissive and defensive. It wasn't just the spending, it was her whole attitude. Over the next few days, things got even weirder. Jessica started asking me for random favors that didn't make sense. One morning, she wanted me to skip work to help her pick out a gift for one of her friends. Another time, she asked me to pick up lunch for her entire office, because it would make a good impression. I can't just take off work whenever, I told her. If you cared about me, you'd care about the things I care about, she shot back. That line felt like a guilt trip, and it annoyed me more than I wanted to admit. Everything now felt like it had to go her way. She even changed her phone habits. She used to leave it lying around, but now it was always with her, even in the bathroom. If it buzzed, she'd grab it and tilt the screen away. Work stuff, she'd say, but paired with her spending, mood swings and defensiveness, it was hard to ignore that something felt off. I told myself to trust her, but the doubt wouldn't go away. A few days after these arguments, Jessica brought up the idea of a baby shower. Well, brought up isn't the right word. She announced it like it was already happening, so I was thinking we should rent out a nice venue for the shower, she said while scrolling on her phone. Nothing too crazy, but something classy, Maybe catering, decorations, a photographer. I raised an eyebrow. Don't people usually have those at home? Like something small with close friends and family? She put her phone down and gave me this look like I just suggested we host it in a gas station parking lot. No, she said, emphasizing the word like it carried some sacred weight. This is our first baby. It should feel special. Special doesn't have to mean expensive, I said. We have a house. We could host it here and keep it simple. Her face twisted into an expression I'd never seen before, part disappointment, part irritation. The father of my child should want to make me feel special, she said, her tone dripping with guilt trip energy. The way she thought emphasizing the father role could work on me was insane, like I'd just forget everything and throw money at her because she played the dad card. I sighed, trying to keep my cool. It's not about that. It's about being practical. We have a lot of expenses coming up, and a fancy baby shower isn't exactly a priority. She huffed and crossed her arms, clearly unhappy. Fine, she said. Forget I asked. I let the conversation drop, but the tension hung in the air for the rest of the evening. A few days later, Jessica's mom called me, and it didn't take long to figure out why. Apparently, Jessica had gone crying to her, talking about how I didn't care about her or the baby because I wouldn't throw her the lavish shower she deserved. Her mom, bless her heart, decided to step in and fix everything. I've already booked the community center and invited family and friends, she said, practically bubbling with excitement. I know you're busy, but I think it'll mean so much to her. I didn't have the heart to say no. Her mom meant well, and honestly, I figured it might take some pressure off me and keep Jessica from spiraling any further. So, I agreed. When I told Jessica about it, her mood did a complete 180. She went from sulking and throwing jabs to beaming like a kid on Christmas morning. See, this is how it should be, she said, practically glowing. It was hard not to roll my eyes, but I let her have her moment. I didn't say anything, but her excitement felt odd, like she cared more about the party than the actual baby. Still, I figured it was harmless. A baby shower is just one day, right? The week leading up to the shower was uneventful, at least on the surface. Jessica was spending more time on her phone than usual, but that wasn't new. She seemed distracted, but whenever I asked if everything was okay, she'd brush me off with a quick, just work stuff. Then, 2 days before the shower, everything changed. Jessica came home from work carrying a gift bag. She set it on the kitchen counter and said, "One of my CO workers gave me this for the baby. Isn't that sweet?" I glanced at the bag but didn't think much of it at the time. "That's nice of them," I said, not really paying attention. She nodded and headed upstairs, leaving the bag behind. I assumed she'd forgotten about it, so I went about my evening like usual. It wasn't until later that I walked over to the counter, curious about what her coworker had given her. I wasn't expecting anything fancy, maybe a onesie or a small toy, but when I opened the bag, my heart stopped. Inside was a handwritten note on a small card. It said, "I can't wait until this baby is here. We're going to have an amazing life together. Ryan." I read the note twice, then a third time, hoping I was misunderstanding something. Who the hell was Ryan? I felt a pit in my stomach as I stared at the card. Jessica hadn't mentioned anyone named Ryan before, not in a way that stood out anyway. Was this just a weird joke, or was it something else entirely? My mind started racing. The defensiveness, the secrecy, the spending. It all started clicking in ways I didn't want to believe. I heard Jessica coming to the kitchen, so I tried to act normal. I didn't say anything about the note yet, but I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. I needed answers, but I didn't want to confront her without knowing the full story. The next day, while Jessica was at work, I decided to call one of her coworkers. I didn't know many of them personally, but I remembered meeting a woman named Stephanie at one of their work events. She seemed friendly and approachable, so I figured she'd be my best shot at getting some clarity. When Stephanie picked up, I kept the conversation casual at first. "Hey, this is Jessica's husband," I said. "Sorry to bother you, I just had a quick question." She seemed surprised but polite. "Oh, hi, what's up?" I hesitated for a moment, keeping my tone light. "Hey Stephanie, quick question. Jessica mentioned a coworker named Ryan gave her a baby gift, and I was thinking of reaching out to thank him. Do you happen to know if he's in her department? I don't want to send anything to the wrong person." There was a long pause. Ryan?" Stephanie said, her voice uneasy. "Yeah," I said, my chest tightening, "her coworker Ryan." There was a pause longer than I expected. Finally Stephanie spoke, her voice uneasy. Ryan isn't exactly her coworker, he's actually her supervisor." That hit like a brick, but I kept my tone steady. "Her supervisor?" "Yeah," she said hesitantly. "Look, I really think you should talk to Jessica about that." That was all I needed to hear. My suspicion wasn't just paranoia, this was bigger than I'd imagined. Her coworker was actually her supervisor. I hung up the phone and sat there for a moment. The weight of it all set in. My hands shook as my mind raced. I needed answers. No more excuses, no more waiting. That evening, while Jessica was glued to the TV, I made my move. Checking her phone felt like crossing a line, but at this point, the line had already been obliterated, and I didn't even care if she came and found me looking at her phone. The messages on Jessica's phone were worse than I could have imagined. Dozens of texts between her and her supervisor. They weren't just flirty, they were blatant. Things like, "I can't wait for us to finally be together, and once the baby's born we'll figure everything out." But what made my blood boil were the ones where Ryan outright talked about using me. "He'll cover the bills until we can make the transition easier," one text said. "Don't worry about him, he's clueless." I felt like the room was spinning as I kept scrolling through the messages. Ryan wasn't just some random fling, he was planning a future with her, a future that only worked as long as it didn't inconvenience him. And the worst part? There was a conversation where Jessica straight up asked what they'd do if I found out. His response? Then he can foot the bill for the kid, and we move on. Like, are you love kidding me? This guy was not only screwing around with my fiancé, but had the audacity to treat me like I was just some wallet to fund their little fantasy life. I was shaking with anger, my grip on the phone tightening. I couldn't believe the sheer nerve of it all. The lies, the planning, the complete disregard for me, and everything I thought we had. I'd bent over backward to give her the stability she always said she wanted. I handled everything at home when she worked late, never complained when her promotion meant less time for us, and supported every single ambition she had, no matter how much it cost me. And for what? So she could throw it all away for some guy who barely lifted a finger? This dude didn't make even half the sacrifices I did. Hell, all he managed to do was knock her up and make plans to leave me holding the bag. Meanwhile, I'm over here doing everything I can to make sure she had the life she always talked about, and this is how she repaid me. Unbelievable. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there staring at her phone, feeling like my whole life had been flipped upside down. By morning, I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't let her keep playing me like this. I thought the baby shower was the perfect opportunity to expose everything. The day of the shower arrived, and I went through the motions as if nothing had happened. Jessica was her usual bubbly self, playing the glowing mom-to-be in front of her friends and family. She was all smiles, acting like everything was perfect. Meanwhile, I was barely holding it together. Her mom had rented out a community center and gone all out with the decorations. People were mingling, laughing, and congratulating Jessica on her pregnancy. It all felt so fake, like a twisted performance. Jessica soaked up the attention, hugging people and showing off the small bump that was barely visible under her dress. Her friends were fawning over her. "You're glowing, and you're going to be such a great mom." I kept wondering how many of them knew the truth or if they were just as in the dark as I'd been. At one point, Jessica's mom pulled me aside to thank me for coming. "It means so much to her that you're here," she said. "She's been under so much stress lately." "This party is just what she needed." I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything. If only she knew what her daughter had been up to. As the party went on, I stayed in the background, watching Jessica work the room. She was acting like the perfect wife and mother-to-be. It was nauseating, but I waited. I needed the moment to be right. Finally, after everyone had eaten, and Jessica was opening gifts, I saw my opportunity. She had just finished unwrapping a cake someone had made when I signaled the server I'd hired. He walked in with an envelope in hand, looking a little nervous but determined. Jessica noticed him and frowned, clearly confused. "What's this?" she asked as he approached her. "It's for you," I said, stepping forward so everyone could hear me. "Open it." The room went silent. People started whispering, looking back and forth between us. Jessica hesitated, glancing at me with wide eyes, but I didn't budge. "Go ahead," I said, my voice steady. "You love surprises, right?" She opened the envelope with shaky hands, pulling out the divorce papers that I'd prepared on the same day I found those disgusting texts. Her face went pale as she read them. "What is this?" she whispered. I crossed my arms and took a deep breath. "It's the truth, Jessica. It's time everyone here knew what you've been hiding." Gasps echoed around the room as I launched into it. I told everyone loudly about her affair with Ryan, the texts I'd found, and how they'd been using me to pay for their future together. I didn't hold back. "While I've been working my a-hole off to build a life for us, Jessica's been sneaking around with her supervisor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And that baby she's so excited about? It's not even mine." Jessica tried to interrupt, stammering out excuses, but I raised my hand to stop her. "Don't even try, Jessica. I saw the texts. I know everything. The late nights, the lies, the spending. It all makes sense now. You've been playing me, and I'm done." The room erupted into whispers and murmurs. Her mom looked like she'd been hit by a truck, her jaw hanging open as she turned to Jessica. "Is this true?" Jessica didn't answer right away. She just sat there, frozen, clutching the papers in her lap. Finally, she looked up, her face red and tear-streaked. "It's not what it looks like," she cried. "You don't understand. Ryan and I—" "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said, cutting her off. "You and Ryan were planning your perfect little life while I paid for everything. You were going to let me think this baby was mine while you played house with him behind my back. Well, guess what? I'm not the man you can play dirty with and get away with it." At that point, her dad stood up and shook his head. "Jessica, how could you do this to him? To all of us?" Jessica broke down completely, sobbing into her hands as some of her friends tried to comfort her. Meanwhile, others were glaring at me like I had just set the room on fire. But I didn't care. I wasn't there to protect her feelings. "Save your tears," I said. my voice cold. You made your choices, and now you get to live with them. With that, I turned and walked out, leaving Jessica and her family to deal with the fallout. The fallout from the baby shower was immediate and brutal. Jessica moved in with Ryan just a few days later, and that should have been the end of it, but of course, it wasn't. At first, she blew up my phone, alternating between tearful apologies and angry rants. One minute she'd be begging me to talk, saying, "I made a mistake but we can fix this." The next, she'd be furious, accusing me of ruining her reputation and destroying her life. I ignored all of it. For a while she went quiet, and I thought maybe she'd finally accepted that I was done. But then the demands started. It began with small things. Jessica wanted me to keep paying for her car. She said it was only fair since she was pregnant and needed transportation. I shot that down immediately. "Ask Ryan," I texted back. "He's the baby's father, not me." But before all that drama with Jessica escalated, I made sure Ryan felt the heat too. Turns out, workplace affairs don't exactly sit well with HR, especially when you're a supervisor and the affairs with your subordinate. I sent an anonymous email to his company's compliance department, attaching a few of their flirty texts, and casually mentioning how inappropriate it looked for a supervisor to be involved with someone they manage. Let's just say Ryan's leadership skills came under heavy scrutiny. Word got back to me through mutual acquaintances that he'd been asked to step down while they conducted an investigation. Guess he didn't factor that into his grand plan with Jessica. Oops. But then Jessica started asking for money. Her argument was always the same: "You owe me at least this much for what we've been through together." She claimed she needed help covering bills, buying baby supplies, and keeping up with rent. I wasn't having it. I'd already moved all the funds out of our joint accounts, so she didn't have access to anything I hadn't given her. I told her flat out, "You're not my responsibility anymore. Figure it out with Ryan." That's when things got messy. The first big blow-up came over Max, our dog. Max had always been my dog. Before Jessica, before the marriage, before everything. I was the one who adopted him, took him to the vet, and made sure he was taken care of. But now, suddenly, Jessica decided she wanted him. "You're leaving me," she said, her voice dripping with self-pity during one of our rare phone calls. "The least you could do is let me keep Max. I need him for emotional support." I laughed out loud, which probably wasn't the most mature response, but I couldn't help it. "Max isn't an emotional support dog," I said, "and even if he were, he's my dog. I've been the one taking care of him for years." Jessica didn't let it go. She threatened to take me to court, claiming she'd have a better case because she was pregnant. I was ready for her though. I gathered every vet record, receipt, and photo I had of Max, proving he'd always been mine. Eventually she dropped it, probably realizing she wouldn't win. Then came the cherry on top, the social media apology. Jessica called me one evening. I didn't even recognize the number because I'd blocked her main line. When I picked up, her voice was shaky but determined. "I need you to fix this," she said. "Fix what?" I asked, already annoyed. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone," she said. "You humiliated me at the shower, and now people are talking. They think I'm some kind of monster." I didn't bother correcting her. "I need you to post something," she continued. "Tell people you overreacted, that you didn't know the full story, and that I'm not the bad guy here." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You want me to publicly lie to make you look good?" I asked, barely able to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "It's the least you could do after everything you've done to me," she said. I laughed, this time not even trying to hold it back. "Jessica, you lied, cheated, and tried to trap me into raising another man's kid. I don't owe you anything, least of all an apology." I hung up before she could respond. Meanwhile, Jessica's new life with Ryan was falling apart faster than I expected. Mutual friends started filling me in on the drama, whether I wanted to hear it or not. Apparently, Ryan wasn't as invested in their future as he'd made it seem. From what I heard, things got rocky pretty quickly after she moved in with him. Ryan started making excuses about money, saying he wasn't ready to support a baby or deal with the responsibilities of being with a single mom. He started pulling away, spending more time at work and less time at home. About a month after the baby shower, I got a text from one of Jessica's old friends. "Did you hear? Ryan dumped her." I couldn't say I was surprised. Ryan had never seemed like the type to stick around when things got tough. Still, I felt a weird mix of emotions when I heard the news. On one hand, it was satisfying to know that karma had caught up with them. On the other hand, I couldn't help but feel bad for the baby, who hadn't asked to be born into this mess. 2 days ago, I was finally starting to feel like my life was settling back into place. Then the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole, and there she was, Jessica. She showed up at my door like a complete maniac, ringing the bell non-stop. I ignored it at first, but she wasn't giving up, so I finally opened it. There she was, looking like a total wreck, hair a mess, eyes red, and this weird mix of desperation and self-pity on her face. "Please," she said, already crying, "I need your help. I can't do this on my own." I just stood there staring at her. I didn't even know what to say at first. Honestly, I was more annoyed than anything. She actually thought she could just show up here after everything and I'd what? Fix her life for her? Not happening. "Jessica," I said, keeping it short, "go home." She started full-on sobbing, saying she didn't mean for things to end up like this, how she had no one else to turn to, blah blah blah. I wasn't buying it. Whatever she was dealing with wasn't my problem anymore. Without another word, I stepped back, shut the door and locked it. Done. Since then, it's been quiet on my end. I heard through the grapevine that Ryan bailed on her, and now she's struggling with rent, bills, and getting ready for the baby all by herself. But honestly, that's not my issue. I've been doing better than I have in years. Max and I have our routine down, and life feels normal again. I'm actually looking forward to what's next.